everyone. I'm Kim McFarlane, and for our second mini lecture on personality research methods, we're going to be talking about quality of data as well as briefly touching on research designs. Specifically, we're going to discuss why it's important to collect as many types of data as possible, as well as discussing basic issues of data quality. The first issue relating to quality of data that it's important to understand is reliability. Reliability is the tendency of a measurement instrument to provide the same or comparable information on repeated testing occasions. For example, if I give someone the same personality test on 2 different occasions, that test would be considered reliable if the same results were obtained on both occasions. If I got different outcomes on the 2 different occasions, then the test would not be considered reliable. Instead, it's likely that the test may have been influenced by extraneous variables. The effect of extraneous influences on a measure is called measurement error, and nearly all measures can be affected by measurement error. What are extraneous variables? Well, whether we consider something an extraneous variable in personality research depends on what the researcher is trying to measure. Specifically, are we interested in measuring a person's current mood, which is a temporary state, or are we interested in testing the person's usual or typical level of emotional experience, which is a more stable trait? Imagine that we were interested in testing someone's typical level of emotional experience, a trait, but the day before he was tested, he won the lottery. Even if this person is not typically a happy person, it's quite likely that on this testing occasion, they're going to be very happy. In this instance, winning the lottery could be considered an extraneous variable that is producing measurement error, and it would be better to administer the test on a different day. Regardless of whether we're trying to test a temporary state or a stable trait, there are 4 factors that can undermine reliability. The first is precision. Perhaps it goes without saying, but measurements should be taken as precisely as possible. Low precision on a measurement can even include answers on a test being scored or entered incorrectly when they're transferred over for data analysis. The second factor that can undermine reliability is the current state of the participant, independent of the study itself. As we've just discussed, if a participant has just won the lottery and we're interested in their usual emotional experience, this is going to produce measurement error in testing that participant. But more mundane things can also influence participants, ranging from illness to their level of fatigue to their level of distraction. Any and all of these things is going to undermine reliability. The third factor to keep in mind is the state of the experimenter. They too can be influenced by extraneous variables like illness and fatigue, which cause them to interact differently with certain participants and which can also lead to measurement error. In addition, unless the experimenter is held constant for all participants, participants can respond differently to aspects of the experimenter like their gender or their age. Finally, the environment itself can be a major source of extraneous influences in a study. This can range from things like the temperature in one of the testing rooms, to the weather, to distracting noise in the building while the study is underway. In order to enhance reliability then, there are 4 things that we can do. The first is simply to be careful. Double check your measurements, data entry and scoring, or get someone else to check these for you. Second, use a scripted procedure or protocol. This means actually writing out a script of what research assistants need to say when meeting and testing participants, providing those research assistants with adequate training, and monitoring to ensure that the procedures you've laid out are being followed. Third, actually measure something that's important and that will engage participants. Participants are less likely to become distracted regardless of what's going on in their life or during the study if they care about what's being tested, and their opinions or behaviors will be easier to measure reliably. Finally, use aggregation or averaging. As we discussed last week, if we want to know whether someone is particularly conscientious or not, We're better off observing their behavior on multiple different occasions and getting an average rather than observing their behavior on one occasion. This is because single behaviors are influenced by many factors other than personality. Even a conscientious person can, for various reasons outside of their control, turn up late to work one day or hand in an assignment late. However, if you were able to observe that person's behavior on multiple occasions, then obtaining the average will cancel any measurement errors out. The Spearman-Brown formula quantifies how this works, but essentially, the more measurement error you have, the more measurements you require in order to average over them and therefore increase reliability. The second issue relating to quality of data that's important to understand is validity. Essentially, validity is the degree to which a measurement actually reflects what we think it measures or hope that it measures. This concept is a little bit trickier than reliability, mostly because reliability is necessary but not sufficient for validity, while validity is not necessary for reliability. For example, if we develop a questionnaire to measure extroversion, in order for that questionnaire to be reliable, it needs to produce the same or similar results on every testing occasion for a particular individual. If the outcome always changes, how can it possibly be said to be measuring what it's supposed to measure? However, even if the questionnaire does reliably produce the same outcomes on repeated testing occasions, that is not sufficient for validity. It also needs to be shown to actually be measuring extroversion and not some other related trait. That's what makes validity a slippery concept. It can be difficult or even impossible to know what certain constructs really are, so it's difficult to know if they are being measured validly. A construct in psychology is something that can't be seen directly, but might be manifested in different behaviors or effects like intelligence or attention or, in the case of personality, traits. If someone is interested in sociability, they're going to have to measure this indirectly by looking at behaviors that are related to this construct, like social interactions and body language, as well as what people can report about their own feelings relating to social interaction. Construct validation then involves establishing the validity of a measure by comparing it to a wide range of other measures that are also said to tap that construct. The third issue relating to quality of data that relates back to both reliability and validity is a broader concept called generalizability. Generalizability is the degree to which a measurement or result of an experiment applies to other test situations or people. Something may be a valid measure with one group of people, but not a valid measure with another group of people. Psychology has come under criticism for using predominantly university students in research due to their availability and ease of recruitment. This is criticized because university students tend to be more affluent and liberal than the general population and are also younger. In addition, depending on where the university is located, they are also less likely to belong to an ethnic minority. Questions have therefore been raised about just how generalizable the results of psychological studies are to the general population. In addition, traditionally there has been a gender bias in early psychological research, with mostly male participants being used. Nowadays, the bias goes in the opposite direction. While researchers often make every effort to recruit equal numbers of males and females, women are more likely to volunteer and actually show up, which means that the men who end up being recruited may not be truly representative of men in general. There's also the issue of no-shows for participants. Are they differing in some systematic way from people who actually do show up? Even though these issues are certainly worth considering, we shouldn't get carried away. First, just as we shouldn't assume that research does generalize to members of other cultures, we also shouldn't make simplistic generalizations that it doesn't. Research on cross-cultural differences is starting to appear, and there's still a lot for us to learn about this. Second, the burden of proof should not only fall on the shoulders of those of us who are actually conducting research, but should also be shared with those who claim psychological research isn't generalizable. It's not enough to simply observe that there are limitations. Answers and solutions need to be provided as well. Finally, I want to briefly touch on the 3 different research designs that are relevant to the study of personality. The first type of research design is the simplest, the case method. This involves researchers or practitioners closely studying a particular person in order to learn as much as possible about their individual case. Carefully selected case studies can be immensely important in learning about a particular phenomenon, but their primary disadvantage is that the extent to which the findings of a case study can be generalized is unknown. That's where the next 2 research designs come into play. Both the experimental method and the correlational method allow researchers to investigate relationships between variables and to test specific hypotheses involving these relationships. In an experimental study, this usually involves manipulating one or more independent variables, which are thought to be causal variables in the relationship under investigation, and measuring their effect on one or more dependent variables. In a correlational study, measures of the variables as they occur naturally are taken, and the strength of the relationships between the variables is obtained. That is, the degree to which one variable changes as another variable changes. Both methods have their advantages and disadvantages, and there is more detail about these methods in the full lecture slides provided on Moodle. You should work through these with the aid of your textbook.